And this is sort of an interesting question from Anthony. I'll just throw it at you. Do you think you would be as forthcoming about your steroid use if you were in the Hall of Fame?
If I was in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a road to get I think a lot of it.
For those who don't know, let me just quickly say.
Right.
Golic just up and said this one day.
Yeah.
Like at the time when the steroid topic first became a huge topic in sports, right around the time Jose Canseco's book first came out, and right around the time it was all going in front of Congress. I don't remember the day, but literally in the middle of a conversation, you said to me, I said to you something like, well, you know, if you had ever used steroids in your career, and you said, well, I did. It was literally that simple.
Right.
You just out and said it. And I said, what? And then you told the story. So it's something that you volunteered. No one outed you. No one knew about it.
Right.
This could easily have remained a secret. So the point is, Golic has willingly acknowledged this freely now on this show for probably something close to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
That said, if you were like a candidate for the Hall of Fame and all that kind of stuff, and it would be held against you, would you have been the same way?
There's a big difference. You're right. That is a great question, because me admitting it on the show, outside of people maybe looking differently at me, it wasn't going to harm me, right? If I admitted while I was playing that I used it, I could have got penalized for it. If this were baseball and I admitted, if there was no indication that let me answer it. Let me put it this way. What do you think the answer to most people? Let me ask everybody else out there. If it were baseball, football's different. I could have gotten away with admitting I use steroids in football and still get into the Hall of Fame, correct?
Sure.
That's not going to stop you. So the better question is baseball. Would you admit it, knowing full well you're not getting in, at least right now? Would you, if you finished playing and had or on a talk show and or whatever the situation, here it came up because of the conversation and our lives are out there and I brought it up, but let's be honest, it wasn't going to harm me in any way bringing it up.
Right.
It could add to the conversation. Some people will look at me differently and think I'm a cheater, and I knew that going in and I accepted that. But if I were a baseball player and there had been I was never in a Mitchell report, it was never even a thought process that I used steroids at all, would I admit that if I'm a candidate for the Hall of Fame? No. And I don't think anybody else out there would either, because you wouldn't get into the Hall of Fame. That may sound wrong, but ask yourself that question. You know, it might be very easy to sit there and say, oh, I would have still come out and said it. Would you have? Would you have? I mean, would you have?
And not only that, I think the more interesting question is, if I were a person who was at the cusp of being a major league player, would I have used steroids to make it? You know, I think that you've said many times, one of the reasons that that you think that most players use, it's less the Barry Bonds's to go from being a 9.5 to being a 10, but it's more the guys who are just fringe major leaguers to make it to the big.
The two biggest reasons for steroid use, in my mind and from what I've seen, is to make a fringe player, pick baseball, a minor leaguer or a major leaguer, and then to rehab an injury. That's what you see a lot of it for, is to get back quicker. That's why I did it. For those that may not know, I got my shoulder reconstructed after the 87 season. This was before steroids was on the books of being illegal in 89, but it was still illegal to do. It wasn't on the books we weren't getting tested for it. I did it in the offseason after my reconstruction. I wasn't assured a spot on the team, and I knew I couldn't miss mini camps with an injury. So in my mind, I had to be ready. So I went on the 6-8 week cycle, and I got myself back. So when mini camps came around, I was ready to go so I could keep playing. So to me, that's the major reasons. You look at the people getting busted there. Certainly, you're going to get your better players who want to be great and get the big contract,
like A-Rod.
But for the most part, it is the fringe players that want to get into the bigs to make the money, or a guy that needs to get back. Especially if you're a fringe player, an average player, you can't be in the tub. You ain't on the club if you're in a tub. So you got to get back quicker. So you're going to take something to get you back quicker. Those are, to me, are the two main reasons people use it. So to answer that question, I would say it would depend on the sport. If I felt confident enough that I could have the conversation about it, especially as a football player, knowing it wouldn't affect my status in the Hall of Fame. Again, people would think differently about you. I get that. then you may say something. In baseball, you think you'd say something when you know absolutely it's costing you the Hall of Fame, when there's absolutely no speculation at that point. Oh, it's like anybody out there right now. Think of all the people that have gotten busted. If they didn't get busted, would we have heard from any of them? Would we have heard from Barry Bonds saying that I use this, or if they had used something, these Hall of Fame guys, would all of a sudden they on their own be telling us they used?
I'll answer that in the form of a question. If Jose Canseco had never written his book, what would the tipping point of all this have been?
Yeah.